Hong Kong, 1972.
The night had settled over Kowloon like a silk shroud, heavy with humidity and the mingled scents of 1,000 kitchens preparing evening meals. In the narrow streets below Nathan Road, where the neon signs blazed in colors that seemed impossible in daylight, where the cacophony of Cantonese and English and a dozen other languages created a symphony of commerce and desperation, a young man walked with his head down and his shoulders hunched, trying to make himself as small as possible. He was 18 years old, slight of build, with a face that could shift from comedy to tragedy in the span of a heartbeat. His name was Chan Kong-sang, though the film industry knew him by another name, a name that would someday become synonymous with action cinema itself, but which now meant nothing to anyone outside a small circle of stuntmen and martial artists. Jackie Chan was terrified. He had been working in the film industry since childhood, trained at the Peking Opera School in a discipline so brutal that many of his classmates had fled or been broken by it. He had learned to fall without injury, to fight without fear, to perform feats that seemed to defy the laws of physics. He had worked as a stuntman on dozens of productions, had doubled for actors who lacked the skill or courage to perform their own action scenes, had been kicked and punched and thrown through windows so many times that his body was a map of old injuries and new bruises. He was tough, resilient, and utterly committed to his craft. But none of that had prepared him for the men who had visited him that afternoon. They had come to his tiny apartment in Mong Kok, 3 of them, dressed in the kind of expensive suits that announced their profession more clearly than any business card. They had not knocked. They had simply appeared, one moment the hallway empty, the next moment filled with their presence. They had spoken politely, almost gently, explaining that they represented certain interests in the Hong Kong entertainment industry. Interests that were concerned about the upcoming production at Golden Harvest Studios. Interests that needed a small favor from young Mr. Chan. The favor was simple. Jackie was scheduled to work as a stuntman on Bruce Lee's new film, The Way of the Dragon. He would have access to the star, would be in close proximity during rehearsals and filming, would have opportunities to speak with him privately. All they wanted was for Jackie to deliver a message. A simple message about an exhibition match that was scheduled for the following month. A charity event that had attracted the attention of certain gambling operations. They wanted Bruce Lee to understand that cooperating with their interests would be wise. That refusing would have consequences. That even the little dragon was not beyond the reach of those who truly controlled Hong Kong. And they wanted Jackie Chan to be the messenger. Jackie had listened with growing horror as they explained what they expected. He had nodded in all the right places, had made the appropriate sounds of agreement, had promised to do exactly as they asked. And then, the moment they left, he had sat down on his narrow bed and tried not to vomit from the fear that coiled in his stomach like a living thing. He knew who these men were. Everyone in the industry knew. The Triads had their fingers in every aspect of Hong Kong entertainment, from financing to distribution to the careers of individual performers. They could make you a star or ensure you never worked again. They could protect you from rival gangs or deliver you to them wrapped in a bow. They operated in the shadows, but their shadow fell across everything, and those who stood in that shadow learned quickly to do as they were told. But this was different. This was not some minor favor, some small compromise that could be rationalized away. They were asking him to threaten Bruce Lee, to serve as their instrument in an attempt to control the most famous martial artist in the world. To betray a man he had admired since childhood, a man whose films had shown him what was possible when skill and charisma combined, a man who represented everything Jackie dreamed of becoming. And if he refused, the men had not been explicit about the consequences, but they had not needed to be. Jackie had heard the stories. Actors who crossed the Triads found themselves unable to get work. Stuntmen who caused problems had accidents during filming, accidents that left them crippled or worse. Some people simply disappeared, their names erased from industry records, their faces forgotten within months. He could refuse and lose everything he had worked for since he was 7 years old. Or he could do as they asked and live with the knowledge that he had betrayed his principles and his hero. So he walked through the neon-lit streets of Kowloon, his mind spinning through possibilities and finding none that offered any comfort. And with each step, he moved closer to Golden Harvest Studios, where tomorrow's rehearsal would bring him face to face with Bruce Lee, and force him to make a choice that would define the rest of his life. The studio complex on Hammer Hill Road was quiet at this hour, the daytime chaos of production replaced by the gentle hum of security lights and the occasional patrol of night watchmen. But in one of the smaller buildings, light still burned behind the windows of a private office. And inside that office, a man who had become a legend sat alone with his thoughts. Bruce Lee had been reviewing footage from the day's shooting, running the sequences again and again on a small monitor, his eyes catching every imperfection in his own performance. He was his harshest critic, always had been, and this production was too important to allow any compromise in quality. Way of the Dragon would be his directorial debut, the first film over which he had complete creative control, and he was determined to make it something unprecedented. Not just another martial arts movie, but a statement about what Asian cinema could achieve when freed from the constraints of Western expectations. But his concentration kept drifting, pulled away by concerns that had nothing to do with fight choreography or camera angles. He had heard the rumors, the whispers that certain powerful interests were unhappy about the exhibition match he had agreed to participate in. The suggestions passed through intermediaries that it might be wise to reconsider his involvement. The veiled threats that came wrapped in the language of friendly advice. Bruce was not naive about how Hong Kong worked. He had grown up in these streets, had seen the complex web of relationships that connected legitimate business to the underworld, had learned early that success in the entertainment industry required navigating currents that few outsiders could even perceive. He had made his own accommodations over the years, had accepted certain realities as the price of doing business in this environment. But there were lines he would not cross, principles he would not compromise, and the suggestion that he throw a fight, that he betray his art and his integrity for the benefit of gambling syndicates, was so far beyond those lines that it barely registered as a serious request. The question was how they would respond when their suggestions continued to be ignored. And the answer to that question was walking toward the studio at this very moment, carrying a burden he had never asked for and facing a choice he was not prepared to make. Jackie Chan arrived at Golden Harvest as the first gray light of dawn began to soften the Hong Kong skyline. He had not slept, could not have slept, and his face showed the toll of a night spent wrestling with impossible decisions. He made his way to the soundstage where the day's rehearsals would take place, nodding to the crew members who were already preparing for the long day ahead, trying to project a normalcy he did not feel. The set had been dressed to represent a back alley in Rome, part of an elaborate sequence that would showcase Bruce's character confronting a group of thugs before the climactic showdown at the Colosseum. Jackie's role was relatively minor, one of the thugs who would attack and be spectacularly defeated, but it required precise timing and considerable skill. Bruce had selected him personally from among the dozens of stuntmen available, citing his training at the Peking Opera School and his reputation for fearlessness. That selection now felt like a cruel joke. Jackie was about to repay Bruce's confidence by delivering a threat from men who wanted to destroy him. He found a quiet corner of the soundstage and tried to calm his racing heart. He could still refuse. He could simply not deliver the message, claim that he had tried but failed to find an opportunity. But the men who had visited him were not fools. They would know if he failed to follow through, and they would respond accordingly. Or he could do what they asked. Walk up to Bruce Lee, the man he had idolized since childhood, and tell him that powerful forces expected him to throw his upcoming fight. Become the instrument of Bruce's humiliation or destruction. Carry that weight for the rest of his life. Neither option was acceptable, and yet one of them would have to be chosen. The morning rehearsal began at 8 o'clock, with Bruce walking the stunt team through the choreography he had designed. He moved among them like a teacher among students, patient and precise, demonstrating each technique with a fluidity that made the most complex movements look effortless. His energy was infectious, his enthusiasm genuine, and despite his exhaustion and fear, Jackie found himself drawn into the work, momentarily forgetting the impossible choice that awaited him. Bruce noticed him during a break between run-throughs. "Chan Kong Sang," he said, approaching with a smile that seemed to illuminate the entire soundstage. "I have been watching you work. Your falls are exceptional. The opera school training, yes?" Jackie nodded, momentarily struck dumb by the direct attention of his hero. "Yes, Sifu. 10 years at the China Drama Academy. Master Yu Jimuan School. I know of it. Very demanding. Bruce studied him with those famous eyes, dark and penetrating, seeing more than most people could hide. You look tired. Did you not sleep well? The question was casual, conversational, the kind of thing any director might ask a crew member who appeared fatigued. But something in Bruce's gaze suggested more than idle curiosity. Jackie felt his heart rate accelerate, felt the weight of the message he was supposed to deliver pressing down on him like a physical force. There were some problems, personal problems. Nothing that will affect my work. Bruce nodded slowly, still watching him with that unsettling attention. Personal problems have a way of following us to work, whether we want them to or not. If there is anything I can help with, you should tell me. He paused, and his voice dropped slightly. I have some experience with problems that seem impossible to solve. For a moment, Jackie felt the wild impulse to confess everything. To tell Bruce about the men who had visited him, about the threat they expected him to deliver, about the impossible position he found himself in. But before he could form the words, the assistant director called for the next rehearsal, and Bruce was moving away, his attention already shifting to the next task. The morning wore on, marked by the repetitive rhythm of rehearsals and adjustments. Jackie performed his part mechanically, his body going through the motions while his mind churned through scenarios and possibilities. Twice he found himself standing near Bruce during breaks, opportunities to deliver the message as he had been instructed. Twice he remained silent, paralyzed by conflicting loyalties and fears. It was during the lunch break that everything changed. The crew dispersed to various corners of the soundstage, eating from boxes of rice and vegetables provided by the studio canteen. Jackie had taken his food to a quiet area near the prop storage, hoping to be alone with his thoughts. But he had barely begun eating when he heard voices approaching, voices that made his blood run cold. He recognized them immediately, 2 of the 3 men who had visited his apartment, their expensive suits looking absurdly out of place in the dusty chaos of a film set. They were speaking quietly to Raymond Chow, the head of Golden Harvest, whose face had gone pale beneath his normally confident expression. And they were walking directly toward the area where Bruce Lee sat alone, reviewing notes for the afternoon's shooting. Jackie watched in frozen horror as the scene unfolded. The men approached Bruce without invitation, positioning themselves in a way that cut off easy escape. Raymond Chow hovered nearby, clearly wanting to intervene but equally clearly afraid to do so. The crew members who noticed what was happening quickly found reasons to be elsewhere, the instinct for self-preservation overriding any impulse toward heroism. But Jackie did not move, could not move. He stood there, hidden behind a stack of prop crates, watching as the men he was supposed to work for confronted the man he was supposed to betray. The leader of the 2, a heavy-set man with silver-streaked hair and the flat eyes of someone who had long ago stopped seeing other people as fully human, smiled down at Bruce with an expression that contained no warmth whatsoever. Mr. Lee, we have been trying to reach you through various channels, but our messages do not seem to be getting through. His Cantonese was educated, almost elegant, a reminder that power in Hong Kong often wore the mask of refinement. We thought it might be more productive to speak with you directly. Bruce looked up at them with an expression of mild curiosity, as if they were strangers asking for directions rather than gangsters delivering threats. I have received your messages. I chose not to respond. That is unfortunate. We were hoping for a more cooperative attitude. The man's smile flickered, a brief flash of something dangerous beneath the pleasant surface. The exhibition match next month has attracted considerable interest from our associates. There is a great deal of money involved, and there are expectations about how that match will conclude. I am aware of the expectations. Bruce's voice remained calm, conversational. I do not intend to meet them. Mr. Lee, I think you misunderstand the situation. This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. We are telling you what will happen, and we are giving you the opportunity to make it easy on yourself. The man leaned closer, and his voice dropped to something just above a whisper. We have many ways of ensuring compliance. Some of them are unpleasant. Some of them involve people close to you. Your wife, your children, your colleagues here at the studio. He paused meaningfully. There is a young stuntman working on this production.
Sean Kong-sung.
Promising talent. It would be a shame if something happened to interrupt his career. Jackie felt his heart stop. They were using him, not just as a messenger but as a threat. His safety, his career, his very life had become a weapon to be wielded against Bruce Lee. And Bruce knew it. Jackie could see the knowledge register in his eyes. A flicker of something that might have been anger or might have been sorrow or might have been both at once. For a moment, everything seemed to hang in the balance. The entire future of multiple lives suspended on the edge of Bruce Lee's response. Then Bruce stood up. It was not a dramatic movement. He simply rose from his chair with the fluid grace that characterized everything he did. His body uncoiling like a spring released from tension. He was not a large man, considerably shorter than either of the gangsters who had come to threaten him, and in any normal context, the physical disparity would have been intimidating. But this was not a normal context. And Bruce Lee was not a normal man. "You have made a mistake," Bruce said quietly. His voice carried no anger, no fear, no emotion of any kind. It was simply a statement of fact, as calm and certain as gravity. "You have come here believing that threats would move me, that mentioning my family would frighten me into compliance, that using an innocent young man as leverage would give you power over my decisions." He took a single step toward the two men, and despite the fact that he was smaller than both of them, despite the fact that they had come with the weight of an entire criminal organization behind them, they stepped back. "Let me explain something to you," Bruce continued. "I have faced death many times. In the streets of Hong Kong when I was young. In the tournaments where men fought without rules or mercy. In my own mind, during the darkest nights when I wondered if my dreams would ever become real." His eyes locked with the leader's, and something in that gaze made the older man's face go pale. "I am not afraid of you. I am not afraid of your organization. I am not afraid of anything you can do to me. Mr. Lee, I don't think you understand." "I understand perfectly." Bruce's voice cut through the attempted interruption like a blade through silk. "You understand nothing. You think that power comes from the ability to harm others. You think that fear is the ultimate weapon. You think that everyone has a price, that everyone can be controlled if you find the right leverage." He took another step forward, and now his voice dropped to something barely above a whisper, but somehow it carried to every corner of the soundstage, heard by every crew member who had been pretending not to watch. "But there are people in this world who cannot be bought, cannot be threatened, cannot be controlled. People who have faced their own deaths so many times that your threats mean nothing to them. People who value their integrity more than their safety, their principles more than their lives." He paused, and his eyes seemed to glow with an inner fire. "I am one of those people, and you have exactly 5 seconds to leave the studio before I demonstrate what happens to men who threaten the people under my protection." The words hung in the air like a physical force, pressing down on everyone who heard them. The gangsters stood frozen, caught between their instinct to respond with violence and some deeper recognition that violence would not save them here. The crew members held their breath, witnesses to something they could barely comprehend. And Jackie Chan, still hidden behind the prop crates, felt tears streaming down his face without knowing when he had started crying. 1 second passed, then 2, then 3, and then, incredibly, impossibly, the leader of the gangsters took a step backward. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but it changed everything. In the complex hierarchy of dominance and submission that governed human interactions, that single step was an admission of defeat. The man who had come to threaten Bruce Lee had been threatened in return, and he had blinked first. "We will remember this," the gangster said, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. "You have made powerful enemies today." "I have had powerful enemies my entire life," Bruce replied. "They have not stopped me yet. They will not stop me now. And if you come near anyone under my protection again, if you threaten my colleagues or my family or anyone else connected to my work, I will find you. Not your organization, not your associates. You personally. and I will show you what a lifetime of martial arts training truly means. 5 seconds. That was all it had taken. 5 seconds from the moment Bruce had begun speaking to the moment the gangsters began their retreat. 5 seconds to transform a confrontation that should have ended in compromise or violence into a complete and unconditional victory. The two men left the soundstage without another word, their expensive suits looking somehow shabby as they walked the gauntlet of crew members who no longer looked away, who now watched them with expressions ranging from contempt to barely concealed triumph. Raymond Chow followed them out, already beginning the delicate work of damage control that would occupy him for weeks to come. And Bruce Lee stood alone in the center of the soundstage, his body slowly relaxing from the state of controlled readiness it had maintained throughout the confrontation. He looked tired suddenly, the weight of what had just happened settling onto his shoulders like a physical burden. But when he turned and his eyes swept the room, they carried a warmth that contradicted the steel he had displayed moments before. "Everyone can come out now," he said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. "The show is over. We have a film to make." The crew members emerged from their various hiding places, some sheepish, some amazed, all of them looking at Bruce with an expression that mixed admiration with something approaching awe. The story of what had happened would spread through the Hong Kong film industry within hours, growing with each retelling until it became legend. But there was one person who did not emerge from hiding. One person who remained behind the prop crates, his face wet with tears, his body shaking with emotions too complex to name. Bruce found him there 5 minutes later, after the crew had begun setting up for the afternoon's rehearsals. He approached quietly, his footsteps barely audible on the concrete floor, and sat down on a crate across from where Jackie huddled in the shadows. "They came to you first," Bruce said. It was not a question. Jackie nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "Last night, they wanted me to deliver a message to you, to threaten you on their behalf." His voice cracked, thick with shame. "I was going to do it. I was so scared. I was actually going to do it. But you didn't. Only because they showed up before I could. I was a coward. I was going to betray you." Bruce was quiet for a moment, considering this. When he spoke again, his voice was gentle, almost tender. "Do you know what courage is, Jackie Chan?" Jackie shook his head. "Courage is not the absence of fear. Only fools feel no fear, and fools do not survive long in this world. Courage is feeling the fear, acknowledging it, understanding it, and then choosing to act according to your principles anyway." He paused. "You were afraid. You had every reason to be afraid. Those men have destroyed lives without a second thought. But in the end, you did not deliver their message. In the end, when the moment came, you could not bring yourself to betray someone who had done you no harm. I didn't do anything. I just hid. You were not ready to act. That is different from choosing not to act." Bruce leaned forward, and his eyes met Jackie's with an intensity that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "You are young. You have not yet learned who you are, what you believe, what you will and will not do. That learning takes time, and it requires moments like this one. Moments that force you to confront your own nature. If the story moves you, do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. These are the moments that shaped not one legend, but two, the encounters that revealed what was possible when courage met circumstance. Jackie finally looked up, his eyes red but his face showing the first traces of something other than shame. "How did you know that they would back down? How did you know they wouldn't just hurt you?" Bruce smiled, and there was something almost mischievous in the expression. "I did not know, not with certainty, but I understood something about men like that, something that most people never learn. They are predators, and predators choose their prey carefully. They attack the weak, the frightened, the vulnerable. When they encounter something that does not run, something that stands and faces them without flinching, their instincts become confused. They hesitate, and in that hesitation, they have already lost. But what if they hadn't hesitated? What if they had attacked you right there? Then I would have dealt with them." Bruce's smile widened slightly. "I have dealt with worse. And more importantly, I would have remained true to myself. That matters more than safety, more than success, more than life itself. He stood and extended his hand to Jackie, pulling the younger man to his feet. Now, we have a film to make and you have scenes to rehearse. Are you ready to work? Jackie wiped his face with his sleeve and nodded. Yes, Sifu. I'm ready. Good. And Jackie? Bruce's grip on his hand tightened slightly. When you become famous, and you will become famous because I can see the talent in you, remember this day. Remember that you are never too small to stand up for what is right. Remember that the powerful are only powerful because we allow them to be. And remember that 5 seconds of courage can change everything. They walked back to the set together, the master and the student, the legend and the future legend. The crew watched them approach with new respect for both, understanding that something had passed between them that went beyond the usual relationship of star and stuntman. The afternoon rehearsals went smoothly, with Jackie performing his falls and fights with a precision that drew praise even from Bruce's exacting standards. When the day finally ended and the crew began their weary exodus from the studio, Jackie lingered behind, finding one more moment alone with the man who had changed his understanding of courage. Sifu, he said quietly, what you said to them, about protecting the people under your protection. Did you mean that? Bruce turned to look at him, and his expression was serious. I meant every word. You work on my production. That makes you my responsibility. Anyone who threatens you threatens me, and I do not take such threats lightly. Why? You barely know me. I'm just a stuntman. You are not just anything. Bruce placed a hand on Jackie's shoulder, a gesture of connection that the younger man would remember for the rest of his life. Every person has value. Every person deserves to be protected from those who would exploit them. That is what martial arts is truly about in the end. Not fighting, not winning, protecting, using our strength in service of those who cannot protect themselves. He released Jackie's shoulder and began walking toward the exit. Go home. Rest. Tomorrow we have more work to do. And Jackie? Yes, Sifu? Stop calling me Sifu. We are colleagues now. Call me Bruce. Jackie stood alone in the empty soundstage for a long time after Bruce left, letting the emotions of the day settle into some kind of coherent shape. He had come to the studio that morning carrying a burden that seemed impossible, trapped between fears that offered no escape. He was leaving with something entirely different. Not just relief, though there was certainly that. Not just gratitude, though that too was present in abundance. He was leaving with a vision of what he wanted to become. The exhibition match took place 3 weeks later, in front of a capacity crowd that had come to see Bruce Lee demonstrate his art. There was no interference, no threats, no attempt to influence the outcome. The gangsters who had visited Golden Harvest Studios had apparently decided that discretion was the better part of valor, and whatever gambling operations had hoped to profit from the event were forced to adjust their expectations. Bruce gave a brilliant performance, showcasing techniques that left the audience breathless with wonder. And in the front row, watching with eyes that missed nothing, sat a young stuntman named Jackie Chan, studying every movement, filing away every detail, beginning the long process of developing a style that would one day rival Bruce's own. They worked together on 2 more productions before Bruce's untimely death in 1973, and in each one, Jackie found himself learning lessons that went far beyond the technical aspects of filmmaking. He learned about discipline and creativity, about the balance between honoring tradition and forging new paths. He learned about leadership and responsibility, about the obligation that power creates toward those who have less of it. And he learned, again and again, about courage, about standing firm when every instinct screamed to run. Years later, after Jackie Chan had become one of the biggest movie stars in the world, after his films had grossed billions of dollars and his name had become synonymous with action comedy, he would be asked in countless interviews about his influences, his inspirations, the people who had shaped his career. He always mentioned Bruce Lee, always spoke of him with a reverence that surprised those who knew Jackie primarily as a joker and a showman. But when pressed for specifics, when asked to identify the most important lesson he had learned from the Little Dragon, Jackie would grow quiet for a moment, his eyes distant with memory. He taught me that 5 seconds of courage can change everything, he would say eventually. 5 seconds when you choose to stand instead of run. 5 seconds when you refuse to let fear make your decisions for you. 5 seconds when you become the person you want to be instead of the person circumstances are trying to force you to become. He would pause, and his famous grin would soften into something more contemplative. I have faced many frightening situations in my career. Stunts that could have killed me. Accidents that nearly did. Moments when I wondered if I had finally pushed too far. Asked too much of my body and my luck. But in each of those moments, I remembered what Bruce showed me on that day at Golden Harvest. I remembered that courage is not about being unafraid. It is about feeling the fear and choosing to act anyway. The story of what happened that day became legend in the Hong Kong film industry, passed down through generations of stuntmen and actors who understood its significance even if they had not witnessed it themselves. It was a story about power and resistance, about the limits of intimidation, about the extraordinary things that become possible when one person refuses to be controlled. But for Jackie Chan, it was something more personal. It was the story of how he discovered who he wanted to become. The story of a mentor who saw potential in a frightened young man and chose to protect him, not because it was safe or easy, but because it was right. The story of 5 seconds that shaped the next 5 decades of his life. Today, in Jackie Chan's private office in Hong Kong, surrounded by the memorabilia of a career that has spanned more than 50 years, there is a simple photograph that few visitors notice. It shows 2 men standing together on a film set, one small and intense and radiating a power that the camera could barely contain, the other young and nervous and looking at his companion with an expression of pure adoration. The photograph is not valuable in monetary terms. There are no autographs, no special frames, no authentication certificates. It is simply a snapshot, taken by an anonymous crew member during the production of Way of the Dragon, capturing a moment that meant nothing to anyone except the 2 men it depicted. But Jackie Chan has kept that photograph for more than 50 years. It has followed him from one home to another, from poverty to unimaginable wealth, from obscurity to global fame. It has been there through marriages and divorces, through triumphs and tragedies, through all the twists and turns that a life lived at full intensity inevitably contains. When asked about it, Jackie will sometimes tell the story of what happened at Golden Harvest that day. He will describe the fear he felt, the impossible choice he faced, the 5 seconds that changed everything. And he will explain, with an emotion that surprises those who know him primarily as a comedian and showman, why that photograph means more to him than all his awards and accolades combined. That was the day I learned what a hero really looks like, he will say. Not someone who is never afraid. Not someone who never faces impossible choices. But someone who, when the moment comes, chooses to stand. Someone who uses their strength to protect others rather than to advance themselves. Someone who understands that integrity is worth more than safety, and principle is worth more than profit. He will look at the photograph, at the young man he once was and the legend who shaped him. Bruce gave me many gifts during the time I knew him: technical knowledge, professional opportunities, the example of excellence that I have spent my entire life trying to emulate. But the greatest gift was what he showed me that day. The gift of understanding that courage is a choice, and that the choice is always available, no matter how frightening the circumstances. The museum closes at 6 o'clock every evening, and the private office where Jackie keeps his most treasured memories returns to darkness and silence. But in that darkness, the photograph seems to glow with its own light, preserving forever the moment when a legend protected a future legend. When 5 seconds of courage planted seeds that would grow for half a century. Be water, my friend. The words echo through the silence, as relevant today as they were 5 decades ago. Be water. And somewhere, in that space between memory and myth, Bruce Lee smiles, knowing that his lessons live on in every film Jackie Chan makes, in every stunt performed, in every moment of courage chosen over fear. If you enjoyed this story, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Every like and subscription helps us continue sharing these incredible moments from Bruce Lee's life, the encounters that shaped not just one legend but 2. Leave a comment telling us what you think about the relationship between courage and fear. Have you ever faced a moment when 5 seconds of choice determined the course of your life? Share your stories. We read every comment. And together we keep the legacy of the little dragon alive. The dragon sleeps, but it does not die. It only waits, living on in everyone who learns from its example, growing stronger with each person who chooses courage over fear. That is the legacy. That is the message. That is the unbreakable spirit of the little dragon, passed from master to student, from generation to generation, from 5 seconds of courage to an eternity of inspiration. 5 seconds. That was all it took. 5 seconds to shut down an empire of threats. 5 seconds to transform a frightened young man into a future superstar. 5 seconds to demonstrate that true power has nothing to do with money or violence or the ability to destroy. True power is the ability to stand, to protect, to inspire. True power is Bruce Lee, standing alone on a soundstage, facing down the darkness with nothing but the light of his own unbreakable spirit. 5 seconds. An eternity of impact. The little dragon, forever teaching us what it means to be truly free.